Hey friends, and welcome back to the Rewind podcast of Forward Church. Join us each week as we take a look back on Sunday's message and dig a little deeper into the conversations with those who are teaching across our sites at Forward. We want to invite you to be part of the conversation too. So if something we're talking about on Sunday morning sparks a question in you, head to our website, forwardchurch.ca/ask us, and submit your questions there. And we're going to do our best to engage with those questions in this space. With that said, let's jump in and get started.
Welcome back to the Forward Rewind podcast. Blair hanging out with you here. I brought about 2/3 of my voice, but I left the other third somewhere across Lake Ontario because that's where my family was.
Who in your home were you yelling at over the weekend?
Who wasn't I? That list is shorter. No, let's get this out of the way. This happens to me often. I swear it's just a curse. But I'm glad Derek's not here because I'm sure he would take many this wonderful opportunity to just roast me on why I lost my voice. It's because you talk too much, Blair. It's because you yell. So let's get it out of our system if you guys have any roasting. No,
I already started. I threw one out there, and Daryl doesn't want to go there. So
no, he knows better. I like that.
We've already had a good conversation about that.
We did. So. But Billy was worried about me, so he brought me some tissues.
I'm just glad.
I thought that was just product placement. I thought that was our new sponsor for today or something.
We're having an intervention
generic
today.
brand Kleenex. Glad you don't actually have COVID or anything like that.
I am not sick. I'm not. So it started with a cold and then it went away, but like I just never got my voice back. So I'm healthy. Don't worry. Although I may have just jinxed myself. Now I'm going to get really, really sick. But anyways, I am blessed with the presence of Pastor Daryl here, who spoke at Kitchener, and Pastor Kirk, who spoke at Cambridge. And we continued our Exodus series. Kirk, you had an illustration in your sermon about driving your car in downtown Toronto.
I did.
But this is not like, you were honest in it and kind of saying like, I maybe had thoughts I shouldn't have had or leaned on my horn a little bit longer than I should have. But this is not your first like driving car illustration. I remember one where you said that like you cut somebody off or you got road rage and you blew them a kiss.
Oh, you remember that story?
Because I can't picture it.
It's been a while since I told that story.
If I looked over and saw like
heard this story.
Like a Kirk Giles man going like,
but I was like 16, 17.
It would have made me so much angrier probably if somebody did that to me.
She was very angry with me. Yes.
Okay.
But she cut me off.
Okay.
So, all right. This is me justifying my actions for a second. Driving down Hessler Road, 16, 17
As you remember it.
Yeah, that's right.
As you remember. Okay.
Well, no, this is how it really happened, Daryl.
This is the truth.
Trust me.
Okay, all right.
You can trust me, Daryl.
There is only one side to this story.
That's right. Driving down Hessler Road, 16, 17 years old. She cuts me off. I get a little agitated that she cuts me off. So I pull up beside her because it's 2 lanes each way going down the road. So I pull up beside her and drive right alongside of her. And I look over at her and I was so angry, but I'm a Christian, so I can't do things that other people might do in that moment. So
absolutely.
So I did the loving thing and I blew her a kiss instead. And she really got angry. Mm-hmm. She was really,
I kept
really
that story in my back pocket because I'm like, I fully admit that I would have to stop myself also from doing different options. And so I'm like, if it just overcomes me, I will just blow them a kiss instead, like Kirk did.
That's right. That's right.
I love stories of when people are like 16, 17. It's just like
driving.
There's
endless amounts.
Just the nonsense that people do when you're that age.
Yeah, frontal cortex isn't fully developed, right?
Or people are just goofballs. Yeah.
That too. Yeah. Idiotic. I mean, I remember being 16 and being like, no, I do know everything. You all are stupid.
Way back in the day, right, Blair?
Yeah, a little further back than I care.
If only we could just maintain that confidence our whole lives.
Yeah. Then suddenly it's like, I know nothing. All right. Well, I appreciated your car illustration and I wanted to bring that one up so I could tell you Blair. I remembered it.
I appreciate you.
I wish I could have more control over things, I remember, but I don't. I remember
It was years ago I told that story. It was a long time ago.
This goes to the thing that always surprised me, always shocks me. The things that people pick up in my message.
Yeah.
I'm like, that was such a minor point, such a small little thing. And it always surprises me.
But the flip is, if they can tell you what the message was about, then it's like, oh, that's great. But if they're like, I don't remember anything else you said, but I remembered this one dumb car story. I can't remember the rest of your message.
Wow.
Yeah.
But
what was the passage
I
on?
do remember your message this week because
it was yesterday.
Because it was
2 days ago.
Actually, I was away and I did listen to it yesterday. So
this is going really well so far.
Yeah, let's start. May as well just lose my whole voice and you guys can take over. We were in Exodus. Does anybody know what week number this is? I want to say 16.
17? 16?
I don't know.
Okay, but we're still in Exodus and we're in chapter 18. And the title of this message was You Can't Do It Alone. And the title actually did jump out at me because I feel like constantly during this series, we've been kind of telling the opposite of what like culture wants to tell us. Right. And this is the perfect example because like culture would tell us you can't do it alone. And even I think about the other one that was talked about, it got harder. Like, again, that's like another kind of pushback on what culture is telling us, which I love because, we've got more to learn here in scripture and from Exodus. So why don't we start the way we always do and give us a synopsis of your message. I'm throwing it over to you, Daryl.
All right. Thank you. Just before the podcast, I was looking over my notes and these guys are giving me a hard time. All right. So I know what it's about now. We're in Exodus chapter, the last part of chapter 17 and into chapter 18, this awesome scene where Jethro shows up and gives Moses some fatherly advice. Great when a father-in-law can do that. And so open up my message talking about the idea that we all have areas of responsibilities. And really what I wanted people to understand is that like no matter what your area of responsibility is, whether it is in your career or being a parent or being a spouse, whatever our area of responsibility is, that we can't do it on our own, that we actually need and we're designed to have a community around us. And so talked about two areas that we need to be dependent upon. First, we need to depend upon God. And we saw that in chapter 17, where Moses is relying on God to give them victory in the battle. But then in chapter 18, he sees really he also needs to have dependence on others around him. He needs to have the right people around him to help him in leading the nation of Israel. He's taken on too much by himself. And so through that, I talked about how we need to find the right people and we need to find our place. Like, what is the specific thing that God is calling you to do? And so that was the focus of the message, and just wrapped it all up by saying, surrender is the way forward. Like, that is the only way. We aren't meant to just try to figure everything out on our own. We really, truly need to have a community around us. So that was the point.
Yeah. And there are some weeks when you guys, and I say you guys, I mean like the teaching team, are like amazingly parallel and it's so cool to see. And then there's other weeks when you're like on different parts. And then other times when, like this week, when you came at it from different ways, but you really did kind of both land in the same similar places. Do you feel like that?
I didn't listen. I didn't get a chance to listen to Daryl's message yet. So
we've chatted briefly, but I haven't listened.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yours, Kirk, was like more like a 5-point principle, right? Yeah. Why don't you give us a synopsis?
Yeah. So the big idea for me was simply, we all have these circles of relationships, circles of influence that we have in our life. And these circles are all interconnected with each other. God's heart for us is for our well-being. I think when you look at Jethro and why Jethro gave the advice that he gave to Moses, Jethro's pretty clear. Like, you can choose this path, but if you choose this path, you're going to burn yourself out and you're going to burn the people you're leading out. Like, it's not only about Moses. It's Jethro's concern for the well-being of everyone. And then he says, if you take this other path, though, if you follow my advice, then you're going to endure and you are going to have peace. And my kind of takeaway from that is that God cares for the well-being of us as individuals, but also the people within our circle of influence and relationships. And And so kind of looking at high level 5 principles from the stories in chapter 17 and 18 that would help us understand how we can make sure we are caring for the well-being of the people around us.
And the word encouragement came up in talking about that. And my start off question, it has to do with encouragement and the power that encouragement has towards those around us. So is encouragement more than just simply helpful words? What does Christian encouragement look like? Perhaps it's an action word?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about the difference between encouragement and Christian encouragement. One of the things that I think we see in the story in Exodus 17 of Aaron and her holding up Moses' arms is sometimes we think encouragement is simply like if I just cheer people on enough and tell them you've got this, you can do this.
Yeah.
That's a form of, and that is a form of encouragement, and that's good. That's a good thing to do. But I think Christian encouragement takes it to a different level, even beyond that. Christian encouragement always ultimately roots all of us back in the power of God, that we are God's children and God is on our side. And so Christian encouragement, when people feel like I can't go any further, we live sometimes in the reality of our own emotions and our own weaknesses. And we sometimes have those moments where we go, I can't do this. I know I can't do this. I know that the odds are stacked against me. I know that this is going to end badly, whatever. To come alongside someone and say, no, you got this, you'll be fine, is almost counterproductive when they're in that space. Christian encouragement comes alongside and says, you may not have this, but God is still with you. God is on your side. God has your back. And let's fix our eyes on the power of God, the grace of God, the goodness of God. Let's root ourselves in that and trust God to show up and God to come through. Let's fix our eyes on him.
Yeah, you touched a bit on encouragement too, Daryl. You talked somewhat about, well, actually, let me jump back to this question then. Encouragement is one of the spiritual gifts, and we've talked about spiritual gifts in the podcast before, right? But one of the points you've brought up is providing encouragement to other people. Do we all have the ability to provide encouragement, or if you're someone who's like, I'm not good at that, and they don't even try? Like, what do you have to say to somebody?
You want to jump on that?
Yeah, I would say yes. That is something that we are called to do. We're in my discipleship group. We are currently going through a marriage series right now. And last week we went through the chapter called Placing Courage. And typically that chapter would have been called Encouraging. Let's encourage your spouse. But they try to change the word slightly to placing courage, and very similar to what Kirk was just saying of you can just cheer someone on. That's a form of encouragement. Like you're doing great. That's awesome. But placing courage is something where you can actually be calling someone to what God is calling them to do. It's where you're actually rooting their identity back into Christ, and you're helping your spouse. You're placing them, back, you're reframing the way that they should be viewing the situation and viewing who they are. And so when we talk about a spiritual gift, there are some people who are supernaturally empowered to have just an amazing gift of encouragement. And yet for all of us, we are all supernaturally, able to, as followers of Christ, to at least some extent. There might be someone who's better. They might have more of an outpouring in that area, just in the same way that someone might be better at evangelism. That's amazing. But we're all called to share our faith. We can't, very few times in scripture does it say, this is a command, but hey, if you're not great at it, you can hide away.
Sure.
No, to the best of your ability, relying on the Holy Spirit's empowerment. That's what we're called to do. So just think of if you're in a marriage and you're no, I'm not called to encourage. That'll be a rough situation.
Yeah.
God has not given me the gift of encouragement, honey, so I'm just not going to encourage you.
You're out of luck.
There's no outs that way. We're called to it.
Yeah. I think that can sometimes be a lie from the devil that slips into our heads to tell us that we're not good at that, or leave it to somebody else. And maybe that's also what happens. Cause Kirk, you talked about, one of your points was telling more stories, like telling stories, like, we should be the best storytellers because we have the best story to tell. So, but I was thinking in my head, Steve hates it when I tell stories because I'm detailed and it's annoying and it takes 20 minutes. And he's usually like, Blair, can you just get to the point of the story? I'm not a good storyteller. So is that like another scenario where like some of us are gifted at that, or like, are we just using that as an excuse again to not tell stories?
I think we just use it as an excuse.
Yeah.
First of all, every person tells stories.
Yeah.
Like when you come home at the end of a day from work, typically in most families, you start telling stories about what happened at work that day.
Yeah.
When you go away on vacation, you come back from vacation, you tell all your friends about all the things you did while you were on vacation. We all tell stories all the time. Mm-hmm. The question for me was like, when was the last time we told stories about what God's doing? Because those are the stories that help to build up the encouragement in people. Those are the stories that remind us that God is alive and active and present with us, and it gives people encouragement when they're feeling down and discouraged, and they go like, where is God in all of this? You start to tell stories and you start to realize, okay, now I know God hasn't like disappeared off of the scene in the 21st century. He's still very much present with us. So I think the key is not all of us are great at telling stories, but all of us do tell stories. Mm-hmm. It's more about what do we tell stories about?
Mm-hmm. Why do you think why do you think we've lost? Because I mean, we've talked before too about in Exodus, passing this information on is all they had, right? Yeah. Why do you think we are not good at telling stories of God in our lives anymore? Do you think that maybe it's a bit of like a maybe cynicism, or like thinking that it's invasive or something, or that you need to have a close relationship to start talking about God with someone? Like, why do you think we've lost the ability?
I think there could be all kinds of reasons depending on the person and their background, right? I don't think there's any one particular reason. I will say that I think we live in a culture where it's a highly scientific kind of culture, linear thinking kind of culture. And we've lost room in our conversations for things that are mysterious.
Sure.
And almost because we discount it right away. And so much of how God functions and operates does not fit into our linear box, right? So I think sometimes we hesitate to tell stories that sometimes don't make sense to people. Mm-hmm. They don't add up because we just don't want to sound crazy.
Yeah.
That's an interesting aspect of our culture, because I think on the other side, and this isn't really a fully formed thought yet, but that's what the podcast is for, right?
Talk, think, Daryl. That's what I call it.
That we live in also like a postmodern society as well, where I think that there's room for that ambiguous or mysterious side of life, and as an encouragement for people who have a story to tell of where God has shown up. I think there is a hunger for a different way of making sense of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you're right. Like there's that hard, like it has to be like scientific and like fully factual, but I think there is this other side in our society where people are longing for, they understand there's some type of mysterious, and maybe they don't fully know how to articulate it. And that's where the storytelling can be really beneficial and actually be a way to help draw people to Christ. But I think part of the reason why we've lost the storytelling is in the evangelical world, we often boil down our stories down to like a salvation testimony,
right?
Which is great. That's a great, amazing story. But when we say, hey, tell me about how God's working, that's broader. And we need to develop those storytelling muscles as well. We shouldn't just boil everything down to a salvation moment. There's so many other ways that God is working.
And even our temptation towards sensationalizing stories in North American culture. So if I don't have the sensational, I lost everything and God rescued me, then I don't really have a story to tell.
Sure, like a lie of insignificance.
Right.
Yeah.
But, waking up and driving down the road and seeing a rainbow in the sky as you're driving into work is a God story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, because it should remind you of God's promises. And there are so many, God shows himself more in small ways every single day than he does in the great big stories.
Yeah.
And so pay attention for all the small ways God's showing up every day and tell those stories. It's become a discipline for us as a team here. And Daryl, you'll know this, and Blair too, right? When we have our site operations team meetings where we just talk about, hey, what's happening in Kitchener and what's happening in Cambridge, the first thing we talk about on every site ops meeting is tell stories of what God's done in the last month.
Yeah.
And when we start to tell stories, it encourages everyone else in the meeting who doesn't even know some of the things that God's been doing.
Yeah.
And so this is just, I think this is one of those things I would love, as a pastor, I would love to see become a part of the DNA of Forward, is that we become a storytelling church to each other of the goodness of God.
In my message, I flew by this part, but I'll share it now. I think with that, an important prayer to be praying is that God would give us eyes to see, like really, truly help me to see where God is moving in my life. That should be, if we make that our daily prayer, we'll begin to pick up on those small things. Like everyone wants the water parting moment. Sure. But there's these small things. Like I don't think I shared it prior to the podcast, but on the losing your voice side of things.
It's a blessing and everyone's grateful.
No, when I first came to Forward, like I was so pumped to be here. We're coming up on my 1 year of being here at the church. And I was so pumped. I'm like, yes, I get to preach and share the gospel with people. And my first day I lost my voice.
I remember that.
And I was so frustrated. The second day, Kirk, you're like, Daryl, introduce yourself to everyone. I'm like, I lost my voice. I can't even say that. I had to type it.
Really?
I was so disappointed. And in that moment, I'm like, okay, so God he's working right now. He's helping me. He build up humility. Yeah. Of so excited to be in this role. And the one thing I need to be able to do is speak, and I can't do it. Day 2, I was so frustrated. And yet that was a moment I'm like, God, you're just here. You're just helping me along.
I love that.
And that's just a small, that was important for me not to miss that, miss that moment. Otherwise I would just be frustrated. I didn't take my vitamins today. What's going on? Didn't drink enough water, but actually I think God was doing something in that moment. So we just need to be aware of that.
You went as far as to say that anything that's good is from God, right?
Yeah.
That is, so that's even when you take that concept and really grasp it, it's whoa.
Well, here's the other thing. So let's go back to the story about me in traffic in Toronto.
Oh boy, I love that story.
Right, that I talked about on Sunday morning. So if we go back to that story, in the moment, I don't see it as God.
Okay.
Right, so I'm in all this traffic and everybody's cutting me off and it's late at night and I'm tired and I'm cranky and I wasn't thinking very godly thoughts towards people. But what if, since the Bible teaches us that God is conforming us to the image of Jesus, what if God actually worked in that traffic jam to try and shape patience in my life? Right? What if that traffic jam was happening for a reason for Kirk to shape Kirk's life to be more like Jesus? See, even in that space, we don't give God credit of, God was even showing up here in this moment and working in my life. But he was, right? I mean, God and Shannon giving me the look and telling me to calm
There.
down.
So here's a question.
Take your pills, Kirk.
But with that, here's a question. Is it when we recognize God working, is he doing the most work, or does it still happen if you didn't even think of it that way, of being stuck in traffic?
Oh, I think God's always working, right? But I think the Bible's pretty clear about that. If I pay attention or not, God's still active and working. But when I pay attention to it, then it also has a significant impact on my own heart.
Like the grumbling versus gratitude last week, right?
Exactly.
Almost like this book's all
grumbled
connected. Almost.
Who'd have thought? No, as you guys were talking, I was like,
Daryl, is this where you talk about how these chapters are written out of order?
Sure, I can.
No, let's not dive into that. You're going to totally throw people off.
I can do a good solid 20 minutes on that.
I know you could.
Yeah,
I mean,
let's not.
As a host,
back to you.
yeah, I was going to say, as a host, to keep things on track, I'm not sure I could even rein that one in. But no, as you were both talking about all that, I'm like, oh, even you're losing your voice. I'd be like, oh, I would be so grumbly. And like you in your traffic, I'm like, oh, I'd be so grumbly.
Blair, I couldn't grumble. I couldn't speak.
Oh, it's in the heart. It's in the heart. You remember, Daryl?
That's right.
But I love what you said. Our prayer, to actually pray.
Yeah.
That prayer of having the eyes to see it, so we don't miss it. I think that's huge. And another thing that jumped out at me in Exodus was the fact that in verse 13, when we see Jethro kind of confused as to why Moses is doing all the things, he's doing all the things all on his own. Which I think a lot of us can admit that we act similarly in our own lives. I'm thinking back to, I think it was week 4 when mere humans, when we talked about the hero complex. Is that a good example of that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Like
some things don't go away from Moses.
Yeah. And the cool thing about this part of Exodus, P.S., go back to mere humans and learn about the hero complex, and we can touch on it a bit. But the thing I liked about this specific spot in this chapter was that we see Jethro seeing something and giving advice when like he's a new believer, like he converted, did he not? And here's Moses, who has quite the experience, and Jethro's the one seeing the blind spot and giving advice on it. I really liked that because I, in my own brain, was like, I would have thought that Moses would be the one to give Jethro the advice. And that kind of can lead us into the topic of community and having the right people around us. And Daryl, you talked about finding the people that are trusting other people around you, but having the people around you that are capable, love God, and have good character. And these are the people that can see your blind spots. And you both talked about that. So I guess a question that I would have in regards to that would be, can this be anybody? Because Jethro does not have more experience than Moses, and yet he saw the blind spots and gave him advice. So these people who are showing us our blind spots, those people that we have in our community, or our hula hoop, as you showed us, Kirk.
I did not hula hoop. Just for the people in Kitchener who are wondering what Blair's talking about.
I have more questions about that, but we'll save them for post-podcast. Those are, as Derek would say, those are for our paid subscribers.
There you go.
Who can we find? Where can we find them? Talked about D groups. Yeah. Okay. But I've got, to be honest, I have lots of questions about who these people are. Can they be someone of the opposite gender to speak spiritually into your life in an intimate way? If you're a married person or they're married, can it be like, is this what a D group is for? Let's talk about these people. Do you guys have in your lives? Are they the Jethros that maybe have less experience than you?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at Jethro. Okay. So he has less spiritual experience than Moses, but he doesn't have less life experience than Moses.
Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you've got to, in his case, respect the life experience he's bringing into the story as well. This is a big question in terms of where do you find these people and can it be anyone?
Yeah.
On some levels, it can be anyone. Mm-hmm. I think the very nature of being part of the body of Christ, 1 Corinthians 12 teaches us that none of us can say that we have no need for another part of the body, that we have a need for every other person who is in the body of Christ. So do we even live with the mindset of, I need every other person who's a part of this community?
Right.
So I think on some levels there is this sense of it can come from anyone. But I do think that there are some different circumstances and conversations that can be unique depending on the situation that's happening, right? So I've got people in my life who have more experience than I do in certain aspects of my job, and so they can speak into things. But equally, like in my home, my wife and my kids, they see my blind spots, and they have no problem calling them out, and I have no problem with them calling them out, right? Like that, and so I value that. Can it come from, like, can someone get that kind of advice from someone who's of a different gender? Yes, but I say that with a caution.
Right.
Like, again, I don't want to give a blanket yes to every situation. I think that you have some cautions around it about, the Bible teaches the importance, for instance, of older women mentoring younger women. And I think, there's a lot of wisdom in that reality that older women can speak to things in the life of a younger woman that other people can't speak to. So I don't know that I would look at it as like, just find one Jethro in your life and figure it out, and that person's the be all and end all. I think it's more this community mindset of there are different voices who are speaking into our life at different levels. And all of that is part of what God's using to shape our lives.
And is that why, like, D group, you talked about D groups, Daryl. Is that why we encourage our church community to join a D group to kind of put them in a position to have those people?
Yeah, my encouragement with the discipleship groups is I think that sometimes there can be a danger in a discipleship group where things can stay surface level for a long time, where you're just kind of there to study the Bible and you just kind of talk about, like we can debate for hours on end. Was it the Red Sea or the Reed Sea? Where did Moses actually cross and all that? Or you can dig into it and say, hey guys, like my marriage was rough this week. Like that takes a lot of vulnerability to actually say, like, I don't know what I'm doing with my kids, or this situation happened in my job. I don't know how to be a light. Like those are times where you can open up, you can share. The problem, like it's hard to be vulnerable. And my hope is that our discipleship groups are designed that is the place where you can begin to really be vulnerable and open up to the people in your group. And even within the group, you might have like one or two people even in the group that goes even a little bit deeper. You might not have everyone in your group over for dinner like every week, but you might have that one guy who's just like, hey, he's just a closer buddy. Like no offense to everyone else, he's a closer buddy. So he's over on Friday and we're digging a little bit deeper there. And that's my encouragement is, if you think of it, the different concentric circles that we have at church. Like you have the broad church body on Sunday, and you probably shouldn't be sharing with everyone in the foyer about your marriage problems. Like that probably will make things worse. So you have the church body, but you're not connected as deeply with everyone. So then you can have other groups like a discipleship group or even a serve team. That might be another area where you're connecting really deeply with this other group. And there, again, like you're building and forming these relationships. That's what these groups are for. It's not necessarily about building up knowledge. It's about building these connections so someone can help you as a follower of Christ, as a disciple. And so we have to be careful that we never push someone away. Like Jethro, he's might be like a new follower of God right here. Not as mature in the faith as Moses would be. Moses didn't just push him aside, say, you know what, you don't know as much as me. until you get your master's in divinity, you can't tell me what to do. He didn't say that to him. He took that knowledge, that advice. And so whether someone is older or younger, if they've been a Christian their whole life, or they're 1 week into it, it's important for us to be willing to take advice and correction from the people around us. Have wisdom and all that, but you should be able to have someone younger, like as Kirk said, like even like maybe it's even your son, maybe it's someone who's like significantly younger, and they can say like, hey, Dad, like I noticed this, or, you know, when I was doing youth ministry, I would love to sit down with youth, and like I would say, how can I pray for you? And they would share, and then I would ask them to pray for me, and I would just open up a little bit of like, here's something I would appreciate prayer for. And it always amazed them that like, here's someone who's older, who's supposed to be mentoring, I just wanted them to see like they, as young as they were, had value that they could give me as well. It wasn't just, you know, one direction that way. So I think with this passage, like we have to look for who are the right people, capable, who love God and have good character. I worry that sometimes when we think of advice, we look for people who fall into that first category, that they're capable. Even though that one comes first in the verse, in verse 21. I don't know if capable is the most important one. I think it's the loving God and good character. I would probably put those maybe a little bit higher on, if you're looking for the right person, as you're asking, like, where do we find them? Be looking for someone who loves God. And that is someone who you should really listen to. Their words should have so much more weight when they share with you, because you know where it's coming from. It's because they themselves have submitted to Christ. So now they are able to share that wisdom. The Holy Spirit might be using them to speak into your life in a profound way.
Yeah, we kind of get to see Moses addressing his hero complex there in that chapter a little bit. Yeah. And talking about Moses and him having the sense to listen to Jethro and where he's coming from, and him pointing out a blind spot, which couldn't have been feeling nice. Probably was like, ooh, shoot, or whatever. Anyways, but for the person who's the Jethro, this isn't even actually one of the questions I had written down, but what about the person who's a Jethro? Like, talk to that person who maybe might see a blind spot in someone maybe in their D group or something. You know, how can are we going back to like one of those gift things? Like, are we all supposed to be doing this to those around us, like this community?
Well, I think you can.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah. I think we, to a certain degree, we owe it to each other to help each other grow as disciples of Jesus. And so, you know, you want to guard yourself from looking for every flaw in someone's life and, you know, spending your entire life being that critical person who just wants to tear people down. Yeah. I think the key here is the way Jethro approaches it. And that is, Jethro's very clear what his heart is. Yeah. My heart is, I want to see this thrive. I want to see you healthy, Moses. I want to see the people be healthy. And what I'm seeing right now is leading to a disaster. And that's when he speaks up. It's not just to nitpick at something Moses is doing. Jethro's playing this out to what the end result is going to be. And he's like, this isn't okay. This is going to end poorly. Right. Yeah. So because I think this is going to end poorly, this is why I want to speak up into this situation. So examine your heart. Why do you want to speak out? That's the first thing. If you're a Jethro, like, what is it in you that wants to speak out? Yeah. The second reason is, do you really want the well-being of the other person? Do you really want the well-being of the people that they're caring for or leading, and the circle that they're operating in? And then say it in a way that still leaves the ultimate responsibility with that person. Right? So I remember asking a pastor one time, what do you do with all the people who come to you with opinions on the way?
That happens to you guys?
It's never happened before. But I said, how do you know which opinions are from God and which opinions are just somebody's opinion and are just a distraction? And this pastor gave a really great insight and wisdom that I'll always remember. He said, Kirk, the people who come to me and say, with humility. I'm genuinely concerned. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's where I think it's going to go wrong. Here's an idea to fix it. And then they walk away and never bring it up again. He goes, I listen to those people. The people who just keep harping on the same thing and get angry because I didn't listen to them the first time that they brought it. He goes, for the most part, I just ignore them because they haven't respected that there's a piece of the story they may not understand or know. Right. And I think that's what Jethro does here. Jethro lives in this space where he knows he does not have authority to make any change. And so he doesn't even try to seek authority to make a change. He just gives Moses the input and he leaves it with Moses. Now it's up to Moses. What am I going to do with the input I've received from Jethro?
No.
Right. And so I think that's a huge piece. If God's calling you to be a Jethro to someone and to speak into a situation, your approach, your attitude, all matter when you're entering into that conversation.
That's huge.
I would even add to it of like Moses knows Jethro.
Right.
Like he spent probably about 40 years with him in the wilderness. He married Jethro's daughter. Jethro shows up here with his daughter and Zipporah, and then their kids, and they have this time of like worship together. They share a meal together. He's sharing these stories with Jethro. He's like, now I see, the God of Israel is far better than all the other gods. And then he gets to the point of advice. And so I would say, like, if you're going to the Jethros out there, like, don't shy away. Like, if you have something you need to share with someone, but also coupled with that is what type of relationship do you have with them? Have you spent time knowing the person, knowing their heart? All of that changes what you can actually say to someone. I think just like what Kirk was saying there, like, how do I know, like, what advice do I listen to? I have a good friend, mentor in my life who can like really tell me what he thinks. And I know that he cares about me. Like, he said time and time again, he's like, Daryl, I love you. Like, I want the best for you. And then he can share a harder truth. And that, like, and I've had other instances, where someone came up and like just told me their advice out of nowhere. And I'm like, what was that? That was weird. I don't know how to take that. Because no relational capital had been built up over time. So Jethro had that. And that, I think that's why Moses really took it to heart.
I feel like maybe lots of us might have an example where someone gave us advice where we're like, I once had someone give me marital advice and they were not married, nor like, were they in my life? And I was like,
if they haven't built that up, they might as well be shouting it out of their car while driving by. And it's going to have the same amount of impact.
Steve's favorite thing is when he is working on a job and someone is telling him how to do his job. He's like, I'm sorry, you called me why? He likes to tell me those stories when he gets home. No, I think that perfectly sets up the big question, another big question, which is, why is it, because Moses, you almost kind of understand why Moses thought he did have to do it on his own. Because what this part of the story, we just came from the grumble fest, right? So he's thinking, as you said, and well, actually you said it too, Kirk, about living interdependently. He probably is kind of feeling maybe a bit isolated because so my question is, why is it significant that this part of the story comes immediately after all the grumbling the Israelites did towards Moses?
I think, I don't know why it was totally significant in the moment for the people of Israel or for Moses. I think for us, it's a great picture of options that we have with our own lives. That, you have the Israelites grumbling, you have Aaron and Hur holding up Moses' arms. Those are two very different choices to make. You have Moses living in this space where he's still making independent choices and trying to take on more than what he can handle. And it's interesting to me because Moses, one of the words I used was Moses was not totally isolated. He still had all these people around him.
Yeah.
Right? Like he doesn't have a shortage of people around him.
Yeah.
He has a shortage of trusting the people around him. That was his big issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know, Daryl, you and I talked a little bit, and I know you dove into this a little bit in Kitchener about just how the grumbling may have shaped the way Moses approached the situation.
Yeah. I think that's, and honestly, until I studied it this past week, I never made that connection of why this was happening. And I said on Sunday of like, Jethro isn't just merely giving management advice. Like he is getting to the heart of Moses in this situation of, and you really saw in chapter 17 that the grumbling, I like how you said that, the grumble fest. That's in the original Hebrew, grumble fest. But
you
actually,
don't have grumble fests?
that they were quarreling, and then Moses started to quarrel with them. And I think that Moses is almost getting to the point of not loving the people around him. And it's really hard to lead a people if you're not loving them. And so even in that moment where he is holding up his arms and the staff, and he is eyes focused on God, and his arms are faltering, he has people around him lifting him up. And Moses still can't see that he has Aaron and her, and then you have like Joshua down there fighting the battle. Like he probably doesn't even see that Joshua is going to be his apprentice who's going to take over someday.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry. Read ahead. This is the first time that Joshua even shows up on the scene.
Yeah.
Yep.
He says, "You fight, I'll do this."
Yeah.
And then he just goes back to business as usual, just going to judge and like be in charge of the whole nation. He needed this moment of Jethro saying like, you have the right guys, you have the right people around you. Why are you still doing this on your own? And I think that this is a healing moment for Moses. And it's so important for us as well of when you get hurt and discouraged in life, it's easy to box yourself in and not rely on the people around you. I think that those hurts that we carry with us, as I talked about on Sunday of, the different potholes and the triggers and the insecurities that we have in our lives, that we try to hide these things from the people around us. And the more that we box ourselves in, I think the less that we allow God to really, truly work in our lives. And I think that we actually need that to be able to be, all of their different areas of responsibilities of being a father, of being a good husband. The more that we can pull people in, like if you're struggling as a dad, like you can, like I would hope that in the church you can find other dads that you can talk to and say like, hey, how do you disciple your kids? That's actually what we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks. We have a men's event coming up where we're going to have a few dads share about how do you disciple your kids at all different ages of life. And what you could do is say, hey, I don't need any advice. I can figure this out. Or I don't need any advice on being a good husband. It's like, why not call up some guys and be like, what are you guys doing for like your Valentine's or an anniversary? Give me some advice. Like, someone might look at that as like cheating. Like, hey, I can't ask for advice. Yeah, it's just got to come from like a romantic heart. I'm like, some of us just need an extra push of like, give me some creative ideas. And there's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong. Why are we so, bent on trying to do these things? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. If there's godly men around you, you can rely upon them. But like for everyone in the church, like that is what we're called to do.
I love this idea that it's potentially connected to what Moses experienced with the grumbling, and just it's kind of this reflection of what's going on in his heart. And I think the challenge for all of us is if you live in that space of saying, I can do this on my own, to now examine your heart and say, why do I think I can do this on my own? What is the message I'm believing? What's happened in my life that's led me to this place of thinking I can do this on my own? And I think that's a big part of the reason, if you need help processing some of those things, that's a big part of the reason why we have our counseling team here at the church, is just that opportunity to walk with you, to help you process so that you can be free from that kind of a burden in your life, and to be able to walk in the space that God calls us to, where we are really interdependent on each other for this life that we're living every day.
Is there we have the church text number.
Yep.
221 226 212
7117.
117. Billy's gonna throw it up on the podcast coming up.
Blair, can you work on a jingle for that so we can like?
Yeah, I always tell the joke. I couldn't hold a note if you put it in my hand. So, no, I will not be doing that.
Okay,
I do not get paid enough to do that.
Maybe Keith can do that.
But if you are a listener who could really benefit from some biblical counseling, is there a text word to? Because I know we have a lot of text words.
Yeah, I think it's just counsel.
Counsel.
But the other space you can go to is if you go to our website and you go to the adult section on the website.
Yes.
There's a section called Next Steps in there, and there's a link to our counseling form in there as well.
So our website is forwardchurch.ca. And if you are a listener who's like, D groups, discipleship groups, that's my next step. That's what I need to do. You can also text, I think it's probably just disciple. Text. I'm like making the decision now. Text the word disciple to that number.
or you can talk to Pastor Daryl in Kitchener. He'll get you hooked up with discipleship group in Kitchener.
Yes.
Or Pastor Kevin in Cambridge. He will be glad to get you hooked up with the discipleship group here.
Just text any word to our text.
Text any word. Text or make a connection. And I'll even just throw in there, like, I feel like a lot of times, like the counseling, the biblical counseling can feel like really scary to people. Like if I text this number, if I talk to Pastor Daryl, I'm roped in for life. What am I doing? I just want to give that encouragement that it's not nearly as scary as you think it is.
Yeah.
So often I have that conversation with people of like, what is the next right step for you? And like, we are never just trying to jam people into different programs.
That's right.
It's always this relationship that we're trying to build and help you with that. And honestly, for some people, they get into biblical counseling and what they find out is, you know what I really need is a discipleship group. So thanks for that one conversation and it moved them into a different area. So it's not like you're getting roped into something for it's easier than you think. And you know, that's the thing that breaks my heart is some people might feel paralyzed by some anxiety around that. We really try to help you along the way to make sure that you're making the right connections for your life.
And it is different than counseling that you receive outside of the church. And one of the ways it's different is that we cover the cost. Like there is no cost to participating in this. This is part of us wanting to walk with you and your own discipleship journey to break free of whatever barriers that you're experiencing in your life so that you can keep moving forward.
Which is crazy. Like I listen to different podcasts and stuff and they have sponsors and I've looked up, like sometimes they'll sponsor like a counseling resource and it's like hundreds of dollars to have a conversation with someone. And I'm like, that's crazy. Who can afford that? And here, like, we can just get you connected with a biblical counselor and there's no cost, which is awesome.
Sometimes just generally speaking, asking for help can be hard and scary. But if you are a listener who we've touched a nerve there, this may be the Lord calling you that it's time to take that scary step and trust us when we say it's not scary. So, let's end it there. And don't forget, Billy, to throw up that number. And with that, my voice is gone. So thank you for listening. We hope you have a great week, everyone.